Okay, hello, can you hear us? I'm gonna bring up chat.
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. We apologize for that technical trouble. We are in a brand new meeting room, and even though we tested it this morning, you know, technology will do that to you sometimes. We apologize for the
Gretchen,
delay.
can you hear me? It's Matt Weinstein.
Yes, we can hear you, Matt.
Hey, Matt.
Please do.
All right. Hi, is a lot of road noise. I'll go on mute if there is.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
Right.
so we are up and running. So it is now 5:36. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. This meeting is being recorded. So now the next thing on the agenda is to adopt the minutes from the previous meeting. So Scott, did you have any questions about the minutes from the previous meeting?
Thank you. I appreciate the work on the minutes and suggest that we adopt them.
Okay, and can I get a second on that?
Oh, you'll get a so moved.
Thank you. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and sign. And just for everyone's information, Matt Weinstein is joining us remotely today. So we have 2 members present in the room and 1 present virtually today. Okay, so the next topic of conversation is the same-day registration. So
Yeah.
Gretchen, if you can give us an update on that.
So same-day registration is coming to Virginia. It goes into effect in October. And we wanted to provide a little bit more information about how same-day registration is slated to work in Virginia. Because I've read a lot of people seem confused. So Virginia still has a registration deadline in place of October 17th. So if you want to make sure that any changes to your address or name are in place, you want to make sure that you complete that those registration changes prior to October 17th. Once we pass into October 18th, we will no longer be making changes to the voter registration rolls in Virginia. What happens starting on October 18th is anybody who wishes to vote in this election will be able to complete a voter registration application, and they will issue what is called a provisional ballot. And what's going to happen is we're going to hold that ballot until the provisional ballot meeting, which is held the day after the election, at which point we can then register that individual. If there are any issues with that registration, we would know at that point. And then the electoral board will decide to either accept or reject that provisional ballot. So this is a new process to Virginia, and it is slightly different than the way it works in some of our neighboring states here in the DMV. So it's important to know that during early voting, anybody who's choosing to complete a same-day registration and vote will need to go to an early voting location in the jurisdiction where they live. So they can go to any early voting location in the jurisdiction where they are currently residing. On election day, you have to go to the precinct where you are currently residing. And that's a very significant difference between Virginia and Maryland. So what we're doing in Arlington is we're working to build some tools that will help people identify which precinct they'll need to go to on election day, where they can successfully register to vote and cast their provisional ballot. All of the same voting rules are in place, so the ID requirements remain the same for a provisional ballot. They will be asked to show ID. If they don't have an ID, they can sign that statement of identity. And then, like I said, their vote is held until we can confirm that they are registered and that that vote was cast in a precinct where they would be eligible to vote before we'll be able to accept it. We're also going to run through some checks to make sure that this individual hasn't voted anywhere else in the Commonwealth prior to that provisional ballot being accepted. So we have been given a deadline to have all same-day registrations entered into the system by the Friday after the election, so that we can make sure that nobody is voting 2 times in this election. Does that answer some of the big questions around same-day registration?
That's very helpful.
I have one question,
Yeah, of course.
which is, this is a federal election, and normally in federal elections, there's that special, this is their first time voting, they can't sign the ID confirmation, they've got to show a federally approved. Does that apply to the same day registration people? Or because they're standing there in front of us, that's not quite the same thing?
So the same ID requirements are in place. So for HAVA ID, they will be required to show an ID if it's their first time voting in Virginia in a federal election.
Okay.
So they will not be allowed to sign the ID confirmation statement.
Okay.
If they are new to, if they are just transferring jurisdictions, and the have you moved rules still apply. So they're they are registered to vote, let's say, down in Blacksburg, Virginia, and they're not going to make it to Blacksburg on election day to go cast their vote. They can complete a same-day registration and provisional ballot where they currently reside. And once again, we make sure that they hadn't voted in Blacksburg before counting that ballot.
But if they're new to basically new to the rolls in Virginia, they're going to have to go with
Yes.
the HAVA IDs, which is
Yes.
basically anything that we would normally accept other than the ID confirmation.
Perfect. And so how we're working to implement this in Arlington is we are adding a position to every precinct on election day. We're calling it a procedural specialist. And we're only going to focus on teaching them voter registration law, making sure they're experts in the HAVA ID and the ID requirements, making sure they have the processes in place so that they are checking IDs for everyone. They are collecting the registration application. Everything's getting filed in the right folder so that we can process it as quickly as possible by that Friday after the election. So that's how we're working to get this implemented successfully in Arlington.
Question, so that you'll hopefully get them processed by Friday, and then the electoral board meeting, is that like the next day?
So the provisional ballot meeting actually starts the Wednesday after the election. Usually they start at noon. And what they do is we'll go through and adjudicate the ones that they can at that time. And then usually they hold, they'll recess until they can complete the rest of the meeting. Because there are a couple of deadlines that prevent them from concluding that meeting on Wednesday. One of them being mail ballots. So any voters who requested a mail ballot, well, that mail ballot has until Friday actually this year it's Monday at noon to get to us because of the Veterans Day holiday after the election. So we aren't able to adjudicate, the electoral board's not able to adjudicate any of those mail ballots until after Monday at noon. And it's the same with ID provisional. So anybody who showed up to vote, did not have an ID and did not want to sign that ID confirmation statement or was not eligible, would have until Monday at noon to get their ID to us. And so at that point, the electoral board could adjudicate those ballots as well.
In addition to the same day registrations that have been checked.
Yeah. The same day registrations, once again, we'll have to see the timing of the reports that we're able to get from the Department of Elections. It's possible that they'll be able to look at those as early as Saturday, but we're still waiting for. And what's important to note is the electoral board only has until Tuesday to certify the election. So it is an extremely tight deadline between Monday
They
at
don't give them
noon
an extra day.
and
because it's the
Tuesday to certify the election. A 2-week extension can be requested by the electoral board in the event that they are conducting a risk limiting audit after the election. That's a new law this year as well.
Yeah, and the risk limiting audit, we are not going to know that it's going to happen until we are notified that it's going to happen.
Yes.
So,
That's all good. I think it's also worth adding that we're required by law to have to start the provisional ballot meeting on Wednesday, by noon.
And that's in order to give, because if you cast a provisional ballot, you as a voter have the right to appear in front of the electoral board to argue your case for why your ballot should be counted or submit any evidence for that effect. And so the electoral has to publish the notice in a meeting time that Wednesday. So,
Question?
yes, of course.
Hi,
Hey, Bob.
you've done such a wonderful job of putting together all these manuals for everything that the election officers are doing. Is there going to be an alternate manual for the provisional people? And if so, I'd love to get a copy of it.
Yes, Bob, there will be an alternate manual, or we're calling it a same-day registration manual for these procedural specialists that we're calling, and they will be made available to all of our election officers. We'll also, while we do have special trainings for those procedural specialists, we are encouraging all election officers to attend them if they want to, because for regular officers, it might be a position they'll consider in the future. And for chiefs, a lot of our chiefs really want to know this. And so we want to give them the opportunity. And some of those will be virtual so that you don't necessarily have to come in person.
Bless
So,
you.
yes.
Which room do you have in mind for the provisional ballot meeting?
Probably this one. Is that okay?
That's fine.
Okay.
And
Yes.
Gretchen, I have a question as well.
Yes, of course.
Matt. So it sounds like voters could update their registration on election day. So for example, if they're in the wrong precinct and they're like, oh, I have to update my registration for the correct precinct, they can do that, but they still have to cast the ballot in the correct precinct, regardless of where they're updating the registration. Is that correct?
So they, in order to insert their ballot into the scanner, they need to be on the books for that precinct. So they need to be a registered voter in that precinct. So if they moved within the same apartment building and they just want to update their apartment number, that would just be an update. That's not a same-day registration. And that's what we've been doing,
For
yeah,
years.
for quite a while now. So. And once again, because there are several flow charts in place, and we'll, like I said, we are developing several tools to help our precincts, because it is the specifics of every individual case really need to be talked through, so that we can advise that voter of their options as best possible. So, yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, because I know it's one of the common reasons people vote provisionally is because they're in the wrong
Yes.
precinct, and this wouldn't solve that in any way because they still have to obviously vote in the right precinct under the Virginia Constitution, I believe.
Yeah, and if a voter chooses to so even if we inform a voter that they're not a qualified registered voter in that precinct, and they still choose to cast a provisional ballot there, and they don't reside there and they're not currently registered to vote there, then the electoral board would not be able to count that ballot under Virginia law. So, yeah.
Will the chiefs be calling you with all these, or your team?
So, like I said, we're going to build some tools. So we already have a map lookup tool in place, and there's actually 3 different, to find out which precinct somebody should be in. We'll be making 3 tools available, kind of the digital and the analog, depending on which method these individuals are comfortable with. Because we've had, getting voters to the right precinct is a problem that we face every election. So.
That's good. Good summary.
And so do look for more about same-day registration. We aren't talking about it much now because our preference is that individuals try to register by that October 17th deadline, because that is the safest way to ensure that their vote will be counted this election. So.
Right, so yeah, so if anyone shows up to a precinct that's not their own, after the 17th, so on election day, they can register, they can do the same day registration, but the chances of their vote counting if they're not in that precinct is, so,
Understood.
yeah. So, and that's Virginia law, so you gotta vote in your precinct on election day. Okay, so logic and accuracy testing.
So we need to set 3 dates for logic and accuracy testing. The first being to do LNA testing on the early voting equipment that will be used starting September 23rd, next Friday. So I had a preference to not do Wednesday if at all possible. But is there an electoral board representative who might be available next week?
What time?
You can set the time and it'll be here. So
Oh, okay.
just not Wednesday was the preference.
Yeah, no, I know. I can be here. I think what I'll do is I'll just take a lunch break. So let's say, can we do it at 11:30? Okay.
Does Tuesday work? Or Thursday or Monday?
Thursday would work.
11:30 Thursday here. And what we'll be testing during this process is we will be deploying a new system that will print out ballots when voters check in on the poll book. So we'll be certifying the poll books, the printers that we're using, and the scanners being used in early voting. So it'll be all three pieces of the equipment.
That's good. Thank you, Madam Chair, for doing that.
So the next date that we need to schedule is for the election day precinct-based voting equipment. And the preference for that was in mid-October. So I'm looking at the weeks of like October 10th through the 21st. There's a time or date available for the electoral board. And we usually start pretty early in the morning. So.
I should probably get my calendar out too. Like I'm trying to remember dates. I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, and I can't look at my calendar while I'm driving, so if we could just follow up afterwards, I'm sure I could be available at some point during that window.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Yeah, we will definitely do that.
Yeah, how about we do this for that time period? How about we just do a follow-up email
Okay, that works.
and we can just pick a date and time.
All right, that's good.
And it's the same for the, we'll need to certify the high-speed scanner for mail ballots as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, you can send us some options.
Yeah,
and we'll
absolutely.
Yeah.
Apply as usual, and that'll help Matt.
Yeah.
Help us, and especially Matt.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That one's for you, Matt.
Thanks, Scott.
And as soon as we set it, we'll know, the party chairs will know.
Mhm.
More people who know, the better the candidates know.
Mhm.
And we welcome some company.
Yeah. So, yeah, and what I'll hope to do, and I'll make sure to include both party chairs, is for that early voting date, because we are in a new location with a new setup. My hope is to be able to walk whoever is here through how that process, we envision the process working for Friday when we open. So
Is it just one representative per party? About two?
we're no longer under an emergency order, so yes, yeah, because of the pandemic, we were limiting access.
Oh.
So it is okay to have two?
It's gonna be a party, Bob, come on down, no.
We have three.
Yeah, we'll talk to the parties and see, yeah, okay.
And I'm sorry, for the one next week, do you have a sense of how long you think that might?
No.
An honest answer.
Yeah, we try, I want to say an hour. Kim has to get back to work, so we will. And obviously every LNA testing we've already done kind of a pre-LNA testing, so we'll have everything set up and ready to go. So hopefully we can move it along pretty quickly. So that Kim can we can at least get the LNA testing done, and we can be available to answer questions for however long we may need to. Okay.
Okay, and there was a third date?
Follow up with email.
Okay, all right. Okay, so that's so next is the update the electronic meeting policy. So Scott, you've got it in front of you.
Yes.
And basically what we're doing is removing the emergency from here. It's highlighted, the additions are highlighted on the second page, Scott.
Yes.
And the big takeaway for this, right, Kim, is that we would be able to have up to 2 all virtual meetings per calendar year, I believe.
Yes.
Yes, Matt, you are correct.
And this, for the benefit of those who are wonderful guests, this is pursuant to a change in by the General Assembly this past session. After seeing what worked well during the pandemic, and I think provides reasonable opportunity for the meetings to go on with understanding situations that arise for members from time to time.
Yeah. And I know what we saw when we started doing virtual meetings is our attendance tripled basically when we
Right.
started having electronic meetings or making electronic attendance possible. So.
Yes, I think that same with the county board and testimony there. And so I think that it's proven to be good things that came out of the past couple of years. Well, you're always walking in person or on by the phone.
And so that doesn't excuse us from having to be in person. So a certain number, so we can only, electoral board members can only, let's see, limited to 2 meetings or 25% of the meetings held relative to the next hold.
That's number 9 on page 2.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's reasonable. This applies to us as well as other county.
Every county commission and board is meeting in person this month to pass an electronic meeting policy.
One of the members of our county delegation who was instrumental in this was Delegate Bennett Parker. Impressive for a first-term member.
All right, so I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the updated electoral board electronic participation policy. So can I get a second on that?
Yes, second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you all. So we have an updated policy. And Gretchen, do you want us to sign this or?
We'll print one that's not yellow.
Okay.
Yeah, we have one.
Oh, fabulous.
Yeah, and it will be effective tomorrow, September 16th, 2022.
Yes, very constructive.
Okay, and then the next part of the meeting is going to be the election officer appointments. So Scott, you've seen the list, I've seen the list. We have, there's been no issues, so that's good. I'm going to make a motion that we approve the election officers for this election year.
Yeah, we're adding 63 individuals. We're approving the appointments of 63 individuals who have applied to work at the polls since you last approved appointments in February.
Okay. All right, so these are new appointments.
Sorry, is this also approving the party affiliation? That's
There isn't a process to approve party affiliation, so,
okay. So that's another question we can talk about.
yeah. So we just approved the appointments for the individuals.
I would second that. I'd also have a question.
Yeah.
In reference to the list that we have. Is there, so there's a master list.
Mhm.
Is there a master list of those of applicants? And then a separate master list of those once they've been assigned
Mhm.
with their party affiliation?
Mhm.
And are they integrated or are they different?
So the code sees them as two, they kind of describe appointments and then assignments. So the list of appointments are individuals who we have applied to work at the polls.
Yes.
And then they have not been yet assigned to work this election. So they should be available to work this election, but there's a separate process by which we go and assign people because people travel, they aren't always available for various reasons. So we have a much longer list of appointments than we actually have of assignments.
20 days.
Yes, and of course, I've seen the list that we see each year of those who are serving in that particular election. The reason why I asked was, because I understand there was a discrepancy in reference to those who had been recommended through the good work that you're doing versus the master list. Do you want to, if I can ask you to elaborate on that?
Sure. So in our meeting with Tate last time, so in terms of the assignment list from last fall, so we identified a number of individuals we weren't comfortable with, being Republicans. And then we were told that actually they were not designated as Republicans on the appointment list. So that's where we were a little confused and we were wondering, make sure.
So what we've done is everybody who's working this election has been sent a form to fill out asking for their party preference. And we've been working with Dominique. So we are collecting this information now so that we can assign them to represent a party. We will be making per the Arlington GOP's request, we will be making the list of individuals who identified willing to represent the Republican Party. We will make that list available to, I believe it's you, Dominique. Tate's working out the specifics. So we will be making that data available. We don't have it yet, and Tate is out of town, and we're, like I said, actively collecting the data this week.
Yeah, I'll update because I actually got the email and so everyone that got assigned to a precinct, which happened, I think, last week.
Yes.
Yeah. Got a link to a form. One of the questions of which is, do you want to affiliate with one of the parties? So that's what Gretchen means by the information is being collected, is everyone has to now go in and update their information.
Because the data wasn't really accurate in our system. So now trying to capture that information so that we can make it available.
I need to upload my form so I can.
Well, that's helpful. That clarifies because
It was a long list of instructions, I think. One of many was party affiliation. So
that's very helpful. I appreciate the elaboration and your comments as well, because I wanted to make sure that they were in sync. And again, appreciate the conversation that we had at our last meeting, remembering that I made many more comments and asked many more questions than I expected. But out of that, I think has come a process that is appropriate, it's necessary, it's in accordance with the law in terms of the review by the parties. And also appreciate the attention that was given by you and Tate to the letters to those who, as a result of your helpful vetting process, should not be indicated as Republicans. If you recall, that was one of my concerns, to be sure that we could handle that with respect to your process, also with respect to those workers who may be outstanding workers who we reappoint. Just need to adjust the party listing.
Yeah.
So I think that's all to the good.
Yeah, that was one of the things I had talked to Tate about, is to make sure that in soliciting that information, people understood that it would go to the party, and that if the party was not comfortable, it didn't mean they couldn't be an election officer, that they wouldn't be assigned to that party.
Yeah.
Yes, how to handle that. Again, I thought that was a little concern for us.
Yeah.
Recognizing one in particular, I know because of her great work over the years in Madison, Caroline.
Yeah.
That everything be handled appropriately with respect to all.
So for then moving forward, I can see the process improving. But for this election, it looks like it's questionable whether there'll be parity or not, because the people will all have to just
Well,
claim that.
Once again, the way the law was written is, it's electoral board is the one who appoints individuals. And ideally, they're appointing from list of individuals provided by the party in January of each year. And it says if parity is possible. So if we can't assign people to represent a political party and we don't have either political party give us lists in January, then it's not practically possible to achieve any sort of parity if we haven't been given a list of approved individuals from either party, which essentially is what happened in January of this year.
And I think a lot of people are just unaffiliated because
We,
the application, I know the state application doesn't have a space to designate, so you would just come in as.
yeah, because once again, as you've noted, the party designation should be coming from the party, not us. We shouldn't be.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we did vet the list that we were given in the fall, and we
Yeah.
told you the ones we were not comfortable with,
Yeah.
assuming then the other ones we would be comfortable with.
Yeah.
So there was a list of several hundred
Yeah,
that we were comfortable with.
yeah.
Well,
Well, with some gray areas, right?
about 100 people, but I'm not sure there were a lot of them we couldn't say yes or no to.
Yeah.
But
We didn't have enough information to decide whether.
Yeah,
So-
but once again, if parity
We'll
isn't
keep-
possible,
we're keep-
yeah, I mean, because we'll be deploying 550 officers this year, so parity would mean 250 officers.
I gave an estimate when they were like, how many could we have? And I was like, you probably could get like 225 to 250 based on like how many people I think I would have.
Yeah. And so, and I
Keep-
think.
Keep looking.
And so what we have done, is any names that you give us, we make sure they have the application and we make sure that we're trying to walk them through the process. But if individuals aren't there, individuals aren't there.
But I guess my question was, how did that list get established? And because there was the initial list from the fall, and okay, we said 26 people were questionable, but then there was quite a number who were still listed as Republican affiliated. Was that list consulted in terms of trying to get the parity for the assignments?
I didn't do assignments last fall, so.
I'm talking
For this fall, once again, I'm sorry, I can't speak for what was done this fall, so,
Okay.
yeah.
From our last meeting, we thought we would have liked to have seen maybe the list before there were assignments were actually formally given. I know there were time constraints, but
So I don't know of anywhere in code that, that requires the electoral board or the general registrar to, before assignments are sent out to voters. Have
There's
it,
one provision about chiefs that
yeah,
don't ask me to quote the section number off the top of my head.
yeah.
You'll probably find it again, that basically says that for the chief and assistant chief, if you're going to assign unaffiliated people, there's supposed
Yeah,
to be.
we're
a
notified the
communication
party, within 10 days before the election,
That,
so.
so that they can then potentially send you more people.
Yeah, and I was under the impression you were actively sending us names, so,
we said
We are
some,
too.
but that's not enough.
you know,
Yeah, we're gonna have to do more reporting.
So it's,
yeah.
just making a note that we would have liked a little more collaboration before the assignment, if it would have been possible.
I don't, that's never how we've done things in Arlington, so.
Yeah, just based on the decisions made at the last meeting, that there were these discrepancies, and just in light of all that, that's what I'm saying.
Well, my hope is that now we're collecting data from these individuals, which we haven't done for some years, asking about their party preference. We'll be able to have a list of election officers that the Arlington GOP has approved to represent them, because that's something that we really didn't have necessarily going into, because once again, assignments we do start that process pretty well in advance, and
And we'll have a list by, ready for January, so it doesn't recur in 2020.
and then, like I said, because if we have that data of these individuals, then we can go through and do assignments.
Your comment's very helpful, because I'm thinking here,
Yeah,
the more I think, both to comply with the code and also, but the vetting process, that the more we can do on the front end, the better.
Yeah.
And also, just to make sure that all you know, that there is an ongoing effort that is being made by the Republican committee leadership. Emails to Republican committee members regularly mentioning this opportunity.
Yeah.
It's a constant promotion, and it certainly should probably use the same on the Democratic side, where we have, again, this work that can go on now, getting ready for next year, which will probably be the lightest turnout, four-year cycle. But as a precursor to 2024, with certainly the largest, that the more we do now and ongoing, the better.
Right, and to Gretchen's point as well, as the board and the general registrar, we don't want to be vetting by party affiliation. So we want the
Right.
list
Yeah.
from both parties, letting us know these are the approved people. And those are the lists that we'll work on.
And Kim, if you and Matt can carry this back to the Democratic leadership,
Yes.
again, everybody's welcome. We can't have enough applicants. We can start too late, but we can't start too soon.
Yeah.
But a real help achieve parity, once again, if we can get this information in January from both the political parties as was the process envisioned in code. So,
And with the action.
And Gretchen, just put a fine point on the process as I understand it. So, we get lists in January from the parties, and the electoral board may appoint officers off of that list. And there's no separate obligation to seek or receive additional lists throughout the year, right? If there are additional appointments, like in this case.
yes, that's,
So,
Matt.
yeah, so the onus is on the parties to provide the list, and that's what we'll work off of, because as Kim mentioned, the elections office does not vet by political affiliation because we don't register by party affiliation in Virginia. So the onus is really on the parties to get us a list, and then we'll work off of that.
Correct. And that process complements the opportunity that people have to apply anytime.
Mhm.
And as look ahead to next year, particularly with the action of the General Assembly that effectively eliminates the convention method,
Mhm.
that I'm thinking also prohibits the mass meeting or canvas, that we would likely have for 2023, maybe Kim can help on this, the prospect of primaries in June
Yeah.
for the General Assembly and the two county board seats.
Yeah. School board.
And
That's some more people.
of course, that's an endorsement process,
Yeah.
but that'll be ongoing too at the same
Yeah.
time. Either party being able to endorse as it wants to, not being able to have primaries because it's not a partisan office. And
I
then-
think is that common,
Go ahead.
the constitutional officers are.
It's
Yes,
all
constitutional
constitutional
officers. I just mentioned the primaries to that come likely in my mind. We could have primaries for any number of offices.
Yeah.
Does that bill go into effect in 2023 or for the primaries in 2024? I don't know. The only reason I'm questioning is that our meeting on Tuesday, somebody referenced 2024 as the start date.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
That is.
So is that
correct.
effectively, if you want to nominate a candidate, you do it by primary or you?
Yes.
So the requirement is that any nomination process must include a way to have overseas and military voters participate. That is extremely difficult for most parties
Convention.
and conventions. So it basically eliminates it makes primary be the default method for
Yes.
party nominations.
Thank you.
So-
I ran two things together.
Sorry.
Should have phrased it better.
Yeah.
The prospects now, the Democratic The reason why I went to primaries for next year first is because the Democratic Party has traditionally done that. Republican Party has done it from time to time. It's been some years. There can be, with the law, that's the correct direction, there can be one time an opportunity if the party chooses they're there for the House. There are legislative and senatorial district committees comprised of representatives in those jurisdictions represented in the House or Senate district. They decide the process. They can decide a primary. They can decide a convention, and in recent years, the canvass method, like a party-run primary, or also a smaller mass meeting that would be used to go in that many, as Rich might remember. And then for 2024, that is when the statewide law takes effect, yes. And that has impact at the, probably more visible impact at the state level, because Republicans have nominated by convention, both parties over the years have nominated by primaries or conventions, Democrats primaries most recently. Republicans have used more combination methods over the years. And so, for example, for the Senate, where there would normally be a Senate seat up that year, a Republican state convention, that's gone. And so there would effectively have to be, because of what Rich outlined, a primary, and also it will therefore set the stage for completing the election cycle, the statewide office in 2025. I hope that helps. As clearer.
Well, as you were saying, the things that were being eliminated, I was like, that seems to only leave primaries left as a way to. But that, it does make more sense if somebody finds a way to do one of those.
Yeah, because I know the school board endorsement process that the Democratic Party ran in 2020 did utilize the ability for people to vote remotely. It also sounded like a lot of work.
Yes.
And it's been some years, but just to make sure you want to know, the Republican Party has endorsed, going back some time, again, as Richard recall, has endorsed candidates for the school board through the county committee process. Same as the Democratic committee could or cannot for the method that's used. It'll be a busy time as always.
Yeah. All right. So we have a motion on the table to appoint the new,
63 individuals.
so we had a motion and a second. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you. So that's really it for business. So I'm going to go ahead and open up to public comments. Okay.
We had a question from, I thought it was asked from the last time about poll watcher proximity. It was, we had requested to be on the agenda from the last meeting, but then apparently that was too full, so we suggested that it be put onto this meeting. So I hope we can have a little discussion about it. So we wanted to make sure that everything was being put in place that would allow poll watchers to see and hear, especially regarding poll books at the early in-person voting, during the cap, and then of course during election in the precincts. And so we did have a tour. I know everything is in construction and you're still thinking through, but there was a few concerns during our last meeting about how that was going to be done, especially for early in-person voting and then cap. So give us some feedback about that.
So as I'm sure you're aware, the do's and don'ts for observers do say that you need to be able to see and hear. But this question about whether or not they can sit behind the poll books and especially behind the counter of the voter registration office was, we were issued guidance last year that explicitly prohibited that. There's no requirement in Virginia code that grants observers access to sit behind the poll book and especially go behind your counter where you're keeping confidential voter data. So the way we have this new setup envisioned, it's based off of what worked for us so well in 2020. when we were at the Wells Fargo, the bank space downstairs, is we had a counter where we were checking in voters, and then we had a voting space. So that's how we're envisioning this early voting process working in our new office. We're going to have our counter, so voters are going to check in at the counter, and then they'll be coming into this room where they'll be able to cast their ballot and then exit out the door. Ideally, we would have 2 lanes of the hallway so we could keep voters coming and going separately. But I'm not sure that's going to work with construction right now.
So will the poll watchers be able to be behind the folks with the poll books?
The poll books will be they will be at the public counter, and we cannot permit poll watchers into the secure space behind the counter.
So they won't be able to see and hear.
The process that we have in Arlington is we do turn the poll book around to the voter where they get to visually confirm their name and address on that poll book screen before we go ahead and issue that voter a ballot. And the poll watchers will be just like they were last year, sitting right there next to the poll books where they can see and hear the process.
It's kind of problematic because it does seem pretty clear in the code and precedent around the state that poll watchers have a right to see and hear, and the poll book is the major thing when the voter is being checked in. That's when, you can make sure that their name is correct.
And once again, we turn the poll book around to face the voter, and if you're standing behind the voter, you'll be able to see and hear.
Yeah.
You'll be able to see the voter's name and address, just like the voter does.
Because you're also asked as a voter to recite.
Yeah, the name and
Recite
address.
it now.
Poll watchers can stand right next to when the voters come up to the thing,
A
they'll stand right
reasonable
next to them.
distance, yeah.
I mean, if it's even 3 feet behind
Yeah.
the voter, you're not going to be able to see them in the
Yeah.
poll book.
Once again, that's why we're I'm hoping with the LNA process that we can walk through some of the logistics of how this will work out so that we can have a demo set up. Because there are other things that I'm hoping to do that might help alleviate some of these concerns. So I encourage you to come next Thursday at 11:30.
All right, I appreciate hearing your work on that.
Yeah.
Certainly for both parties, being able to hear and see is important,
Yes.
here as well as for some precincts.
So Gretchen, will the voters, when they check in with the poll book, will they be standing or seated?
Standing.
So the poll watchers will need to be standing for hours at a time. Is that correct?
So we have some stools. We're trying to get some stools so that you don't necessarily have to you'll be able to sit on a bar height type stool. Because we do try to be as accommodating to our poll watchers as possible.
Thanks.
So
All right, if you can play out the process, I'd suggest when you do the testing.
So I've been working with this office since 2008, and we have not once had poll observers behind check-in since I started here in 2008 at this building.
True. That's not true.
Martha, when was it true? When did we have poll workers sitting behind during early voting at courthouse? When did we have?
Early voting at courthouse, and you helped us get chairs right behind the poll.
That was after we had moved to the room outside. And we did that for to make more room for voting inside the room. But since 2008, every single setup originally there's no space to allow poll watchers behind poll books.
Okay, so this time the setup will be quite different from what we experienced in the last
It will
election.
be very similar to what was used so successfully in 2020.
Okay,
That's worked well.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
Gretchen, remind me, in 2020, Wells Fargo, poll observers were not behind the counter, right?
That's correct. They were not behind the counter. We had poll watchers there every day. And they stood off to the side and were able to watch and hear the check-in process. Or I think we processed more than 40,000 voters at that location in 2020.
Thanks.
Yes.
It might be helpful to send you said it was Department of Elections guidance about this. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
So maybe send that around to the Republicans and Democrats.
Yes.
And that reminds me, since Matt mentioned guidance, I've been asked to serve again on the Virginia Electric Board Association's Legislative Committee. And one matter that's arisen is in reference to the Social Security number issue. I don't recall seeing guidance from Elect on that. Have you seen anything or have any indication that something's coming or could be requested?
On social, is it on absentee ballot applications or voter registration?
The absentee ballot.
Okay, so I have not received any updated guidance in the last 6 months on social security numbers and absentee ballots, and I don't know if guidance is coming. I will say I'm getting a flurry of guidance right now, so that is entirely possible. And that's the one announcement I need to make him too. Sorry, I forgot.
Okay.
Redistricting is complete. There's a big sigh of relief at the Department of Elections, and every voter in the Commonwealth will be getting a notice of their new districts and their polling location, and those will be sent, where are we now? The 7th. Those will be sent around the 21st and the 22nd next week here in Arlington. So you should hopefully see it by not next week, but the week after that. It's not an envelope. It's going to be a postcard that the voters open to tell them of their new precinct. So now that redistricting is complete, we are seeing a lot more guidance as we get ready for early voting to start next Friday. So,
Yes, I saw the guidance that came today, and
yes.
that's a lot of work.
So just, we consulted with the legal counsel of the Virginia GOP, Chris Marson, and he informed us that in the GREB, that there is guidance about the last four of the social that was provided there. So
the GREB has not changed since last year, and the issue with the the GREB is the GREV handbook. And the issue with the GREV handbook is if you go to chapter 7, Frank, I believe you have the page in front of you.
right, the reference.
Online, there's a new GREB from July.
Yeah, I have the one from 7/22. I
Okay.
printed it out yesterday.
Well, you said like in the last year.
It hasn't, this section hasn't changed. I compared it to last year before I pulled it out. So I know you're looking at one section, but if you go to 7.7.14, there is this statement in code about if you're reviewing the absentee ballot, we cannot reject the application for any individual because of an error or omission relating to the application if such error or omission is not material in determining whether such individual is qualified to vote absentee. And so that's the section that really there hasn't been a legal challenge to say what is material or not material in determining a voter's eligibility to vote absentee. But I know that I don't want to get into an argument or debate here, because I would say 95% of the applications that we receive requesting mail ballots come to us through the online portal that the state provides, which requires voters to enter in their full social security number and their DMV ID number. So the number of paper applications we've received this year, it's negligible. We're talking a tiny stack. So.
But were some accepted without those last four of the social?
Once again, I haven't reviewed every absentee ballot application that's come in this year, so I couldn't say, but the guidance is the guidance.
And what I was looking for was indeed whether there was, as came up on our call,
Yeah.
Any update to what you cited.
Yeah, and that's one of those things that, I mean, like I said, we really are in this gray area because until somebody defines what is a material omission for determining whether somebody is eligible to vote. And there are material omissions for determining whether or not we can accept an absentee ballot, but there really isn't anything to determine what is material for the eligibility to accept an absentee ballot application.
So the last four, even though they're one of the main requirements, is not considered.
To give you, well, we don't, Frank, it hasn't been decided, like yes or no, it just hasn't been decided. To give you an example of how this works on the voter registration side, so there's a requirement that voter registration applications contain applicant's gender, but gender was determined not material to somebody's eligibility to register to vote. So we cannot deny an application if it doesn't contain gender on it. So once again, I'm not a lawyer.
So that would be the recommendation to the state board, is that they need to make sure whatever they want to be material has to be stated
Yeah.
in the GREB. That
It would, no, usually these come in the form of administrative regulations passed by the State Board of Elections. That's where the material omissions for petition pages and absentee ballots are both covered.
Thanks for that.
Thank you.
And I will say, so every effort is made, so if there is an omission, we do contact the voter, but once again, like we're following what's in the GREB handbook for us to do. So.
And this is just, if you send in a request to get an absentee ballot, not whether the absentee ballot that you send back is then considered acceptable and can be put.
Yes, we have a lot of material omissions for those.
And which is then again different from what would be considered material on a voter
I'm
registration.
not real happy with Gretchen here.
Yeah.
Well, usually I am, but there's a couple things coming up.
We hear you.
Once again, this is one, we are bound by the laws in front of us, and this is one of those areas of code that really needs to be defined. So.
I think at some point we might be able to find out how many were accepted without the last four of the social.
It's a question for the electoral board.
I would suggest for Colleen, the issue came up last year.
Last year was a different case. There was
Yes.
a mass mailing that didn't happen this year at all.
Yes.
So like I
Yes.
said, we had a lot more paper applications relative to online applications last year. And last year was it was only like 1 or 2 binders worth.
Yes.
This year, like I said, it's really negligible.
Why do you
Yes.
think there's a change from last year?
So there was a third-party outreach effort last year for mail ballots, and that third party didn't conduct the outreach effort in Virginia this year, from what I can tell. So like I said, most people, and we also have the permanent absentee ballot list, so people who want to vote by mail, they're already on that permanent absentee voting list. We didn't get an application from them, so.
It was done last year by that third party in
Yeah.
consideration of statewide races.
Yeah,
But yes, given this discussion and given the discussion that we had last year and your examination of the boxes, I'm certainly fine with disclosing the number.
yeah. To give you an estimate of the numbers we're looking at, in the last 3 weeks, we've processed 24 applications. Almost all of them have been online. 1 or 2 have been paper. So we don't see paper applications anymore.
So Frank, what is it exactly that you're looking for? Are you looking for a count? Or are you actually looking, or do you want to see the actual application?
Counts to start, how many were
That's why I mentioned that.
Yeah.
approved without the last four of the social? Because for a lot of people, they feel that that's important in an absentee ballot application. And that would be material, even though it hasn't been defined as material. So, yeah.
Okay, I'm fine with numbers. I'm fine with
And again, the issues arising elsewhere, so thank you for that. Good discussion.
numbers. Scott, did you have a question?
I did, that was
Oh,
it.
okay.
Yes, thanks.
All right. Anything further?
Kim, I just have a request real fast.
Yes.
So I know we got a request forwarded to us from Action for Enterprise, which I guess is a nonprofit working with the GOP or something, I don't know, but just request that those requests go to all members of the electoral board if there's a request to put something on the agenda, so we can see it ahead of time and make decisions. Thank you.
That was my email that I probably sent with the questions.
So the electoral board sets the agenda items, so any request for agenda items should probably include the entire board. So, and that's
Okay.
why so when we're setting the agenda, they get forwarded to the entire board.
Yes, we welcome ideas always.
Yeah.
If anyone is with us, of course, the more we can address, the better.
Yeah, I would say that if there's any item that you would like us to add to the agenda, once you can just reach out and ask us when is the next meeting. Get it to us a week in advance. It'll give us time to get it on the agenda. All right.
Just one more question about the Fort Orange Press, that whole process, how that's happening, and how the code says that the printer has to sign the statement that everything is going according to process, and then also that the election office is supposed to have a representative continuously there while those ballots are printed. I guess it doesn't say anything about mailing, but I'm just curious how the office is.
Yeah. So we are so for those, to give some backstory just for the callers. So one of the new bills that was introduced this last year requires us to report mail ballots and early votes by precinct. The only way to do that is to have a precinct specific ballot for every voter. So we went from having one ballot style in Arlington to having 54 ballot styles in Arlington. The best way to ensure accuracy and to do this is to automate it. Our numbers are such that to try to do this in-house and keep 54 mailings separate would be all but impossible. Did you help out in the mailing in 2020?
I did not.
Okay.
It did not sound like fun.
Okay, Scott stopped by. Scott stopped by and saw the operation that was that mailing in 2020.
Yes, and I stopped envelopes.
You did. It took 30 hours to print labels alone for that election. So we are outsourcing the printing and mailing of ballots. And we are going with a company called Fort Orange Press. They are also being used by the city of Alexandria in Virginia. And they have a long history of mail ballots. They're based out of New York, but they work with Georgia and New York mainly. And I have not had the opportunity to visit their operation, but my counterpart in Alexandria has, and she was very impressed with the security that they had in place. And they did answer all of the questions correctly that I asked, and I'm very thorough. The way the process works is we're in the process of getting our envelopes finally approved, and then we're getting everything to the state because they'll need to review any contracts that we have in place. And they authorize the method in which we're delivering the election documents, so they will have to be securely transferred to the organization, both the data files for the voters and the ballot images that they'll have. And what we'll do is we'll send them a file daily of anybody who's applied to vote by mail that's come in. And then they generate the mailing. It knows to attach, so it'll have the precinct in the voter file, and then it knows to pull that precinct, to print that precinct's ballot. And it's only going to print the ballots for voters in that data list. It's not like they have stacks of ballots sitting in a room. Mm-hmm. It's only printing what it needs to. So we actually think it's going to reduce costs, both in labor, and we don't have to order hundreds and thousands of ballots that we ultimately won't end up using. So once it prints everything, it assembles that voters will be able to track their ballot end to end. They have a strong relationship with their post office that they have up there. And so it'll be taken to their post office up there and basically flown straight into Maryfield. Come out to you guys.
Question?
Yeah.
If there are returns where ballots are sent out and then are returned because they're not deliverable, where do they go? Do you get them back?
Yes, we do
get them back.
Yeah, so the return addresses are, so the envelopes are looking the same. They'll look the exact, they're a little bit different because they have to put in some QR codes to automate and the checks in place, but the envelopes will look the same. They'll have our seal on them. All the like I said, everything has to be approved by the Department of Elections. You mentioned there are a series of statements that have to be signed and it's not just the mail ballot printers. We're actually having the election officers who work during early voting because they are also printing ballots. They'll be signing statements as well, attesting to the number of ballots that they print during early voting each day. So.
Oh, that's right, because it's printing ballots.
Yeah.
But if something is sent out in the mail and then it is returned to the third party, are they giving it back to you or are they just holding on to it?
So their address is nowhere, the voter will have no way of knowing that this has come from that printer. All of the addresses on it are us,
Yes.
are
So,
for
I mean,
Arlington.
so the post office is going to send undeliverables back to you?
Yes, we pay for it, Bob.
Okay, I mean, because there's
First
apparently,
class
yeah, there's been a problem with the post office sending undeliverables back to third parties and then they disappear.
Yeah. No, these, so undeliverables come back to us, and this, what they actually do, it's actually better than what we currently do, is they run the addresses through a confirmation software. The state doesn't have this ability to do this. So they'll actually have a list of addresses they think might be bad, so that we can review those prior to that data file, prior to those ballots going out that day. So it's actually a stronger control of addresses than what we currently have in place.
Bob, as a taxpayer, you're helping to pay for this return, the same as us.
Understood.
We don't have that many returns.
Is it something like they're gonna send from Albany to Merrifield, like huge batch? And
They
then
take them straight to the post office, and they have so the post office is can sometimes be a challenging organization to work with. But they have a very good and strong relationship with their post office. They've established over, and that's, like I said, my counterpart in Alexandria gave her seal of approval to all of this, both in the, how they go from point A to point B to B. And they have tracking codes for the ballots that get uploaded directly into the USPS system, so the voters will be able to track them instantly. Yeah.
So they'll be mailed from the Albany post office, or then they will all go through the Merrifield? Is that just?
All mail in Northern Virginia goes through the Merrifield
Oh.
Post Office, and that started several years ago. There was some federal legislation that all mail has to be screened for anthrax, and so all mail. And so if you're in South Virginia, all of their mail will be routed through a North Carolina distribution plant. So even if you're mailing a ballot in Mecklenburg, Virginia, it's going to go out to North Carolina and come back to Mecklenburg.
It's true.
That's why I was talking about North Carolina last time.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
And it is faster. So it actually might be faster than if we took it to our neighborhood post office here, because it's going straight into their distribution plan, straight into a distribution plan out, as opposed to us going to a neighborhood post office to the distribution plant and then out.
That's good, since I asked about that also last time.
Yeah.
I hate to be, one more point. Discussion during our last meeting, when we came, Dave, we saw where the area where you're planning to do the cap. That's the latest term, or the processing, pre-processing or processing cap. So there was a question then about, since those will be, the mail-in ballots will be screened, will be opened, will be checked with the poll book, will be run through the scanners, that this is, should be considered a precinct.
Mhm.
And therefore, these should be election officers, and therefore the same principles apply, seeking parity and also being able to see and hear. So just curious, because Tate wasn't quite sure.
Yeah, the central absentee precinct is the precinct, and yeah, all the same rules apply.
Okay.
Yeah,
We
think that we're just reporting, we're breaking it out by the person.
No, I think what happened when we met with Tate was she coming from Georgia? Is that what she worked?
Alabama.
Okay.
It's easy. to
And
get-
we also, even in like some, you talk to people who are talking about, and it gets very easy to sort of align the difference between pre-processing and what exactly that is versus cap. And so I think she may have been understanding us to be talking about pre-processing, when you get mail ballots back and you open the outside envelope and check to make sure that they've got everything and start the cure process if they don't.
Yeah.
Being different from when those security envelopes go over to be opened up,
Yeah.
checked by officers, checked into the poll books, opened up, put in boxes, sent through
Yeah.
the scanner. There's a distinction between those two, and
Yes.
it's very easy not to quite
So this.
delineate where that,
Yeah, this is one of the administrative challenges that I don't know if every elections office have, but in Arlington County, it's been a struggle for really the last 10 years. Because the central absentee precinct used to just convene on election day. So they were election officers like anyone else. But now we start processing ballots, which is opening the ballots and feeding them through a scanner. That starts several weeks in advance of the election. And so the question always becomes, well, how do you pay them? Are they hourly or are they daily? Sometimes they can't come in every session. So how do we? And so one of the things, like I said, that we're doing, one of the reasons for the big change in election officer pay this time is that we're trying to create more flexibility so that we are better able to tap into all of our election officers to put into this pre-processing. Because the way it worked before is they weren't at an employment status that allowed us to pay them hourly. And now we're trying to put everyone will get a stipend, but we'll have the option of paying them hourly should we need to. And that's, like I said, one of the reasons for the change. And
now what Kate said makes sense, is because they have to be paid hourly, they have to be considered county employees and not in the same group that me, like as an election officer, used to be counted in.
yeah,
We were separate and in this different pot because we just got paid our flat amount
yeah.
Well,
per day.
but just because they're, I don't know if they're.
No, but now I'm understanding like where potentially we got confused with Kate about what we were talking about, and without her here, I can't.
Yeah.
But I mean, will they be considered election officers?
They are election officers.
I mean,
They
they were
always were.
recruited from election
Yes.
officers, but I mean, they will have the same status as an election.
They are called election
They are,
officers.
okay.
And now we have an election officer HR category that
Okay.
allows us both to
Pay
pay
them by hour.
stipends and hourly. And the work to get that done administratively is very difficult. So,
So yes, election officers.
Yes.
They're in a precinct.
yes. Yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so I'm gonna recommend we wrap. It is 6:47. Thank you all. Some really great conversations. And hopefully we were able to answer, Gretchen was able to answer some of your questions as well. So 6:47, I'm going to adjourn the meeting. Can I get a second on that?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much for
Yes,
joining us today.
thank you all indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.